Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. I'm like in a fit of rage today. You know what I miss about the pandemic?
No.
That nobody was ever out. Like everybody was in my way getting to your house today. Like drive fast, get out of the fast lane if you're not going to pass people.
With that, I agree completely. Yeah. Not so much necessarily that I liked life better with nobody around, but I've never been able to figure out. I don't care how slow you want to drive.
Get out of the left lane.
If you want to drive slow, then don't drive in the left lane and don't race to get out in front of somebody. So I just this morning had a guy like peel out of a parking lot to get in front of me while I was driving down Lexington Avenue.
And then
drive 40.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you're only going to drive 40 miles an hour in a 45 zone, then just wait till I go past.
Yeah.
I have no problem with guys like racing to get in front of me if they're going to bust it down the road.
Yeah.
But just your comment was interesting because I had this thought yesterday. I was walking through the Skyways downtown yesterday, and I thought, you know what? This feels like life is back to normal.
Yeah.
The traffic downtown is back to what it used to be. Walking through the Skyways, there were lines outside of every restaurant around the lunch hour. I thought it was great because I thought, wow, this is a great sign for our world, for our city, for our state, to see that people are coming back to downtown Minneapolis. So I know you appreciate living life in solitude. I don't mind being around other people. So I found it to be a positive thing.
I just want everybody to get out of my way. Here's another thing that I was thinking about with the pandemic. For 2.5 years, I didn't get sick. Now I'm sick every week. Like I just got over like a 3-week cold in December. I go to Vegas for 3 days and immediately catch a cold again. Like everybody's just sick on planes. Like it's just like, I don't know.
Why?
Because everybody's sick.
Well, but why do you I haven't gotten sick in a long time. I actually think it's the opposite where it's everybody now is back to fresh air. And
I don't think that's what it is. I think people are just gross and they're just hacking away on planes.
Well, now we should specify for the listeners that you are the type that when you cough, your first instinct is to try 14 different kinds of medicine.
That's true.
And like last week, you all of a sudden said that you were congested, and I'm on like 13 different antibiotics. And
no, that was in December.
Well, okay, so 2 shows ago.
I was on a steroid regimen, but it didn't make me stronger.
Right. And so for me, if I feel like something's coming on, I drink a little orange juice and get a good night's sleep, and then I usually feel better the next day.
Yeah. You're also the guy that didn't go to the dentist for 10 years. So
well, and I haven't been to the doctor in even longer.
All right. Let's get to the show because we do have a lot to talk about. Next live show, by the way, is at Elsie's on January 22nd. That is at 7 p.m. Come on down for that. And then our next live show after that is February 5th at Split Rocks at 7 p.m. That'll be our only live show in February. And in fact, in February, most likely I'll be single hosting 2 of our episodes. Well, we do actually decided,
do one. Yeah.
Okay, so you are willing to do one from Costa Rica.
We'll do one while you're in Montreal or Boston or somewhere, and I'll be in Costa Rica. It'll be great.
And maybe when I'm in Montreal, I can get like Billy Guerin or somebody to come on the pod, or an Elliot Friedman or something like that. By the way, thanks to our newest sponsor, Giggly THC Beverages. You can get them all throughout the Twin Cities, 500 locations, actually, every place from Total Wine to MGM to Cub Foods. So Giggly THC Beverages, you'll hear more about them in the show. And also last week we had a new sponsor, Clamshell Beach Resort.
I've been to Clamshell.
Yeah, have you?
Yes, it's a great spot. It's not far from Whitefish Golf Club, where my high school golf buddies league used to go up there and play on opening fishing weekend every year. We called it the Whitefish Cup, and we'd stay right down the street from the Clamshell.
That's awesome.
And we've got some good friends who have been regulars on our European trips that have cabins up in that general area. And
we'll have to go up sometime. That'd be a blast. Because I really haven't done anything with like the Minnesota cabin life. I went to Eric Stolhansky's cabin once. It's the only cabin I've ever been to.
Well, you're not really a cabin guy, but you would like this area.
I like the wood.
Yeah, as long as it's like got Wi-Fi and a Starbucks
that's true.
nearby.
But I like the woods. I like drinking coffee on the patio.
It's actually a great that's a great area up there, and it's on one of the great chains of lakes in maybe anywhere in America where you can find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for peace and quiet, you can find it. If you're looking for a place to pull up in a boat and have a cocktail on a deck somewhere, you can do that too. And I love the vibe up there. There's plenty of golf courses around if you're into that. If you're just into sitting on a fishing boat and floating around, that's there too. So it's a cool area, and Clamshell's a solid spot. I've actually stayed there a few times, and our group stayed there a couple times in the spring when we were up there for that golf tournament. So it's a cool area. I'm glad to have them on board for the show.
Yeah, let's definitely go up there. We'll bring a bunch of giggly.
Are you a THC beverage guy?
I am now.
Are you really?
No,
have you tried them? I haven't tried them yet.
Yeah, but we will. We'll bring some giggly THC beverages up there. We'll really chillax up at the Clamshell Beach Resort.
Yeah, you on THC beverages.
Don't you think that actually would probably be the only thing that would calm me down?
Well, so far I've known you for 20 years or so, and I haven't figured out what calms you down yet.
That's true. But you know what? You said that really made me want to go up to Clamshell. Peace and quiet. Nobody in my way.
There won't be people in your way.
Nobody in the fast lane driving slow.
Well, there is no fast lane. There's only one lane going each way for part of it. So actually now they've got 4 lanes going most of the trip up there. But there are a lot of the roads right around there. There's only 1 lane going each way. So once you get there, you can relax.
Nice.
You wouldn't relax much on the way up. Perhaps.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Although I'll listen to a couple of podcasts. Maybe this one.
Maybe you can ride with me. That way you don't have to get stressed.
All right, cool. So let's talk about. I have so much to talk to you about. You think that the beginning of this pod ranting was? I got so much to talk about with officiating and fans on Twitter and all this stuff. But let's first get to the.
Speaking of relaxation,
Oilers fans. Holy crap! I didn't think anybody was worse than Jets fans, but Oilers fans are by far the worst. But anyway,
actually, I thought Stars fans were right. Avs fans aren't that far off either.
Every fan.
Yeah.
Somebody actually tweeted recently in the next couple, is anybody bitch more about the fans and sports writers who actually need the fans to stay employed? And it was actually a kind of, for about 5 minutes, it was an epiphany for me.
But it is, but that's what I've said so many times on this show. And I know when you and I have talked, I love the fans. I love the passion of fans. And I love it even when the Wild lose, and it's because the play-by-play guy had the gall to say how many shots on goal there were for each team, and that the Wild were playing just fine. That's what makes our jobs what they are. It's the fact that 19,000 people cram into the arena last night to watch a game and get excited about it. And it's why right now the fans in Minnesota are so worked up about the Vikings losing a first-round playoff game and talking about how defines their life and everything. I mean, that's what makes our jobs so much fun. Is that and I get it, fans are going to overreact in both directions. When the team wins, it's the greatest thing ever, and when the team plays poorly and loses, it's time to fire the GM, fire the coach, fire the play-by-play guy, the beat writer's a homer, you name it, they've got it. And so some of it I can dismiss quickly and just kind of roll your eyes. And fans
always see something with their own, colored glasses,
right.
So, but that's what ticked me off last night is like these Oilers fans, like if McDavid got chicken winged.
It's unbelievable.
And
that was the point. I posted a tweet last night during the game because I wasn't calling the game. I was just watching. And that was my first instinct, was if that had happened to McDavid. So I thought about that a little bit this morning. If Ryan Hartman does that to Connor McDavid,
Middleton
it's a major penalty without a doubt, and potentially the league.
The only
is
difference
with
Hartman did it is that McDavid did it in the so subtle way where nobody really noticed, where Hartman would have taken his.
He probably would have, but let's even just say it was the same play. Yeah. If Ryan Hartman does that to Connor McDavid, there is no doubt it's a major penalty. 100% a major penalty. If Marco Rossi does that to Connor McDavid, it's a penalty. Without a doubt. There is no chance that it goes uncalled. And I'm not saying McDavid's a dirty player. I really don't think he is.
No,
but he knew exactly what he was doing. He did it on purpose. And even players that are not dirty players commit penalties. That's the nature of the game. I don't think the play was worthy of suspension or anything, but it was a penalty.
Yeah.
There's no doubt it was a penalty.
Technically, an elbow with an injury is usually a major.
But now let's take it to the next level. There are 2 other ancillary points to that. One is to all the fans saying that they think Johansson dives. the guy's he's bleeding and likely concussed just based on the fact that he didn't come back. Not that I want to speculate, but his head snaps back and he leaves the game and doesn't return. If this is a dive, this guy's playing the longest con in hockey history to make sure that people know it's not a dive.
The other thing is you and I cover this guy. He doesn't dive.
He doesn't dive. Number two, if you were the official on the play and you didn't think it was an elbow, how do you not call it an embellishment?
Yeah.
How do you not put your hand up and say, I don't think McDavid hit him, and this is how he flopped on the ice? Yeah. How do you not call it? Now, in hindsight, knowing that we know that it was an elbow, it would have been the worst call possible. But if that's what you think you saw was no contact.
Here's the problem.
And then how do you not call embellishment on the play?
Right.
Then the last part was I heard Chris Lee's explanation that I think he hit him with his own stick. Well, number one, the stick flies the other direction on the play. So this is it's a subplot to a larger issue that it drives me bonkers when officials can't just say, I missed it.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. If you say that instead of making something up like, oh, I think he hit himself with his own stick. Well, how in the world does he hit himself with his own stick on that play? If that's what you think you saw, just say, I didn't see it. And what can a coach say? I coached high school football. I coached Legion baseball for a long time. You'd go out and talk to an official or an umpire. And if they just said, you know what, I didn't see it. What else can you say?
Yeah.
All right, I get it. I respect that. But when you start making up a story about what you think you saw, it's like now you've just set yourself up to look like an idiot. So to say he hit himself with his own stick, well, come on. I mean, how do you not? And then they saw it when they go in an intermission.
Yeah. And then
how do you not come back out and say, hey, you know what, guys, I missed it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
That's the thing. And I'll tell you, I hate makeup calls, but the fact that like that to me is almost more arrogant. And that's been one of the refs' MOs for his entire career is you go in and you actually see it, and then you actually go out there and say, you know what, I'm not even going to give them another penalty. I just the making up. Just say you didn't see it, but to make something up and insult the intelligence of everybody.
Right.
Now, the one thing I will say is I don't doubt that they missed it. I really don't think this was just, oh, it's McDavid, we're not going to call it. Because even the players on the ice didn't see it. Like Eriksson X right there, he didn't see it.
Well, right, but it's not Eriksson X's job to be watching for it. He's watching the puck. There's 4 officials whose eyes have nowhere else to be.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, there's
because a linesman can help them with a major.
Help for certain. Yeah. And the puck is coming out toward the blue line. A linesman's eyes are probably not far from that play. The fact that all 4 of them missed it I thought was because I saw it live. I thought for sure live, and I wasn't sure if it was his elbow or his shoulder, but I knew that he had caught Johansson's jaw when I watched the play live at full speed.
Yeah.
And so there are going to be missed calls. But I can't stand when officials aren't willing to just say, I might have missed it.
Yeah.
And if I did, I apologize. I might have missed it.
Yeah. And it's a huge moment in the game. It's 3-3.
Absolutely.
And it changes, obviously, the course of the game because they score early in the third period. And the Wild's power play was buzzing last night.
And things are magnified when you're the Wild right now playing as short as they are. Now you take another player out of the game, another top 6 player out of the game. They're in a tight spot with very little margin for error, and those are the kind of plays they can't overcome right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's talk about the injuries right now. So assuming that Johansson is hurt, and I was told last night that he had a concussion, but assuming that we will not see him right now, Jacob Lauko has been activated off LTIR. Now, Devin Shore and Ben Jones were sent to the minors. So now, if you assume that the Wild had 12 healthy forwards last night, you take 2 out, that's 10. If Johansson's out, that's 9.
Put Lauko in, so you're back to 10.
Right. And now they have enough money with the 2 assignments to call up a forward, 11. There is a chance if Kirill Kaprizov doesn't return on this road trip or in one of the 2 games, meaning Nashville, that they're going to have to play a forward short. This is assuming that Johansson's out. So maybe you play 7D if Brock Faber comes back, or they are going to go with 11 forwards, 6 defensemen, play a player short for one game. That now will allow them to go over the cap. The other option, because the way it works in the NHL is if you play short one game, now you can go into emergencies and all that stuff. The other option actually is if Kirill Kaprizov isn't playing in Nashville, LTIR, you could retroactive LTIR him and then afford call-ups. And the reason there is that I think that in the LTIR with him being out 10 games plus 24 days is the January 18th game. So then he'd be eligible to come off right when he's ready to play, even as soon as Colorado. So this is off the top of my head, but clearly they're doing some salary cap gymnastics right now.
Well, without a doubt, they have been for weeks now. And just based on, and I haven't asked anybody about it, maybe you have, I haven't talked to anybody about it only because we weren't doing the game last night. The fact that those guys were skating with the team certainly is always a step that means they're pretty close. And the way Kaprizov and Lauko were out skating after the practice yesterday, in my far less than expert opinion on how guys looked, it certainly didn't look like they were laboring. I'd be mildly surprised if we don't see Kaprizov at some point. Now, this is 100%. This is not based on conversations with anybody. He just seems like it's likely he's going to be on the trip, whether he plays or not, yet to be determined. But I think the last point you made is probably the most likely. Comes on the trip. They put him retroactively on LTIR. And because that he hasn't played since before Christmas. So you could do that, have him be eligible to come off for the second game of the road trip.
Right.
That way you call somebody up in Nashville and get an extra forward. Yeah. Now, who that forward is starting to become more and more of a question to me, because we've talked so much about, the depth players that they've added this year in Iowa. The guys like Shore and Jones and guys that have really filled a good role for Minnesota since coming up here. But now you're talking about another top 6 forward going down. Is it time now to start to consider a different kind of call-up, somebody that can fit in that role? And if Kaprizov truly might miss both the games on this trip, it wouldn't shock me if that was the way they
obviously
went.
Things change overnight, but I was led to believe last night that Kaprizov wasn't going to be coming on the trip, or at least playing on the trip. So,
and I just was assuming he might come on the trip because if he's skating with the team, that way you get a chance. You practice Friday at home. They're going to practice in Denver.
Well, we think.
So I would assume because it's a day game the next day, no morning skate. So my guess would be they'd be practicing there, wouldn't cancel it. Now that gives Kaprizov a chance to be on the ice with the team Friday at home before you leave, a morning skate Saturday in Nashville, and then a Sunday practice in Denver.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm looking at Puckpedia right now, and it's acting on here like the Wild don't have enough. As long as this is up to date, that the Wild don't have enough room for a call-up. And if that's the case, I do wonder if maybe this isn't updated. But I just, like, doing the math, I just think the only way they can not play short is if they put Kaprizov on LTIR. But we'll find out. I mean, by the time this pod's out, we'll probably know the call up and we'll know what's going on here. But clearly, it just wouldn't shock me if at one point they decide, all right, you know what, let's bite the bullet, play short one game, and then things free up. Let's take a quick break. Hey, as you know, and are more than aware by now, it has been a very cold winter, and we've got like 3 months left. Well, don't let the cold take over. Keep your home warm and worry-free. Right now, you could save $98 on repairs at AquariusHomeservices.com. Get reliable furnace repair from a company you trust this winter. I trust them. I've had them for years. There's nobody I trust more. And by the way, this $98 discount, it's also applicable to plumbing and electrical problems. So make sure you go to them for any repairs that you have in your home. Visit AquariusHomeservices.com to get your heat back fast. AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
When it comes to great steaks, it's all about the marbling. And there's a 1 through 12 scale for marbling that will measure what the quality is of the steak. And for Feller's Ranch Wagyu, it's some of the best you'll find. They won't sell their steaks unless they're at a marbling level of 6 to 10 on a scale of 12. It's some of the best steaks you'll find. Just for reference, USDA Prime can be called USDA Prime as long as it's at 3 or 4 on that same scale. This steak is some of the best I've had. You can find it at fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They can deliver it to you. There are also a couple of spots within the cities where you can pick it up. You won't be disappointed. If you're having a great meal and you want to have steak, there's no place to go that's better than Fellers Ranch.
Want to keep the party going without the next day regrets? Well, say hello to Giggly THC Beverages, your new social sidekick for good vibes and an even better taste. No alcohol, no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and superfood extracts like ashwagandha and ginseng. Whether you're clinking cans at a backyard bash or just chilling with friends, Giggly's got you covered. Ditch the hangover, sip something smarter. You can find Giggly THC Beverages at over 500 locations, including Total Wine, MGM, Cub Foods, Top 10, and many more. And because we think you're going to love it, we're offering 50% off your first order with code Giggly North. That's Gigli North. Shop now at giggly.com. No alcohol, no hangover, just giggles. Back here, worst seats in the house, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Again, January 22nd is our next live show. That is at Elsie's. Always love going out to Elsie's.
So what I had just kind of a couple final thoughts on the Wild injury front. I had you talked about Edmonton fans and they were chirping about how Johansson took a dive and everything. I also had a few that reached out, and I did a radio show in Edmonton. I did a couple of them yesterday, actually. And on one of them, one of the guys actually asked me that he thought it was overblown, the Wild playing through injuries, because everybody plays through injuries, and Edmonton's had to do it too. And I just said, you know what? I said, I just don't think you're comparing apples to apples when you talk about a guy missing a game or two here or there. And I said, so let's look at tonight's game. This was yesterday or on Wednesday before the Wild Oiler game. So the Wild are without Kirill Kaprizov. So let's take Connor McDavid away from the Oilers. The Wild are without their best 3 defensemen. So let's take away Nurse, Bouchard, and Ekholm. I said, can either of you guys even tell me who the 6 defensemen would be that Edmonton would play if those 3 guys were all out? I mean, you might be able to name the 4th. I said, because for Minnesota, if you would have told me that Dermott and Juracek were both going to be playing for Minnesota about 3 weeks ago, I mean, we didn't even. Dermott was just picked up on waivers as like an insurance
from
thing
Edmonton because he couldn't play in that lineup. He couldn't play
there, and Juracek was in the minors. So that now, don't just take those guys out for tonight. Now take those guys out since Christmas. And go to Dallas and go to Washington and go to Carolina and play home games against Vegas and Colorado, or go to Vegas, play Colorado at home, play Edmonton at home. These are the teams the Wild have faced with all these guys or most of these guys out of the lineup for, it's been 3 weeks. And that's the equivalent here. So it's
Johnny Merrill was a top pair defenseman last night on his offside. Enough said.
Right. It's just,
like, my God.
And the fact that Minnesota gave them a pretty good battle last night and played them dead even until early in the third period.
My biggest concern here with this is just like, as guys get back in the lineup, are they going to rediscover that exact structure that we saw earlier in the season when they were just, dynamite? And that's my biggest thing, because they don't practice anymore. Like, teams from now on do not practice.
Well, and the Wild haven't been able to, partially because of these injuries.
Yeah.
And you got guys you're overplaying because you don't have the rest of your lineup. They just need days off.
Look how many guys played 26, 27 minutes. Matt Boldy played 27 minutes last night.
I know. And so now really, do you want to put Matt Boldy on the ice today to practice?
No.
I mean, that's why they're canceling so many. But this also leads into one of Vinny's thoughts for this week's show, which I think is a good tie-in here. And he said the Wild have had injury issues every year. Now, I know the last 2 years have been worse than what they've had recently. And he says, I know I watch mostly Wild games, but it seems that we have more trouble staying healthy than most teams. Is there a point where you start to look inward at the training, the preparation, the recovery processes?
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, just one other point to that Oilers fan that messaged you is that, like, take
that was
all
one
these
of the
guys
hosts of the show.
Yeah, like, oh, really? Well, take all these guys out of the lineup, plus the lack of depth on this team because you're paying 15 million
no,
less than
I know,
everybody
no
else.
question.
Like I just don't understand. Like I got into this with Avs fans the other day too. Like, come on.
The Wild were about 40 million under
in terms
the cap
of the,
NL.
like, there's no, look, I don't doubt, like, a part of, I remember when the Florida Panthers, when I was covering them, and they had something like 350 man games, and Stan Wong, the trainer, who's still a USA hockey trainer, was fired. Now, was it his fault that they had 350? No. But, and same thing here. Like, I don't think that you could blame Matt Harder, who's their strength coach, or John Worley. But the reality is that you do analyze everything. But look at some of these injuries. Like, it's not training that hurt Jake Middleton's finger.
No,
it's not training that got Brock Faber concussed, or Jared Spurgeon hit from behind, or things like that. Now, Kirill Kaprizov's groin, Jakub Lauko, like all that stuff. I'm sure that's the stuff that they're going to look at.
Yeah, and there's stuff that it all plays a factor.
Yeah.
So usage plays a factor. We had just coincidentally been talking about all the minutes that the Wild were playing because of the fact that guys were out, and coincidentally, the next two games they lose Faber and Brodin, and you never know. I mean, if a guy was playing 24 minutes instead of 27, do the same things happen? They could have happened just as easily if a guy played 8 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, Brodin blocks a shot in the final minute of a game. He was on the ice for 3 minutes or whatever at that time, and that had nothing to do with the fact that other guys were out. They just got stuck on the ice.
Absolutely, and the fact that they kept on icing pucks that left them out.
Faber gets elbowed in the head. I mean, that could happen in the second minute of a game. Spurgeon getting crumpled up on a bad hit. I mean, that could happen on the first shift of the game. For sure, there are things, and injury potential gets exacerbated when you have to overplay guys. There's no question about that. But I don't think in these cases that was likely a contributing factor on these specific injuries. Maybe it's been over the years. If Jonas Brodin's playing 22 minutes a night and he's absolutely on top of his game, does he get hit as often? Probably not.
Yeah.
If Kirill Kaprizov's playing 22 minutes instead of 26, is he more likely to stay healthy all year? Well, there are a lot of nights he only plays 18 because the game dictates it too. So, I can't imagine that overuse played a role in his injury here lately. But I do think you always have to look back and say, are we getting are guys coming back too early? Are guys rehabbing the best way possible?
Yeah.
And trust me, the Wild study this as deeply, as thoroughly as anybody. Every team in the league is taking a look at this stuff for, how they get guys back. And there are some guys in this Wild lineup that are a point in their career where keeping them on the ice for 75, 80 games a year is going to become more and more of a challenge. It's just the nature of the game, the way these guys play the game. They play hard. And when you get to the point in the careers that some of these guys are, they're going to be nicked up, and they aren't going to bounce back as fast as a 23-year-old does.
What is frustrating, and this is nothing against the players, but from a Bill Guerin standpoint, what's got to be frustrating internally for the team, and I'm trying to say this with all due respect because it's definitely not going to come out great, but as good as Spurgeon and Brodin are, and as irreplaceable as they are, because they are so important to this team, you can guarantee that they're missing 25 games a year each. I mean, Brodin is always out with something, and it is partially because of the way he plays. He throws himself in front of shots. He's willing to take a hit from Evander Kane, even knowing it's coming. And sometimes maybe you have to go the Ryan Suter approach, where sometimes you let them get the puck first. You make sure that you're not clobbered into the corner. I mean, do you think that at some point you have to almost tell? I mean, a leopard doesn't change its spots. You're not going to get Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon to play less gutsy, but at some point, these guys they can't have them out of the lineup as often as they are every year with the lack of depth that this team has.
Well, I agree that they can't afford to have them out. The only thing, I think it's a little bit of a I think it's a little exaggerated sometimes how many games they've missed, because like if you look at Jared Spurgeon, he missed all of the previous season, basically. But before that, I mean, he had played 79 the year before that. I mean, that's pretty close. He had played 54 in the COVID shortened season,
which is a lot.
He played 82 a couple of years before that.
Or how about Rhodes?
And Brodin has been.
He's the one that's 20 games a year easy, right?
I don't know if it's 20. I think it's less.
I mean,
than
it's
20.
always like middle 12 gamers.
Yeah, he's missed, I'd say, an average of 15, probably 12 to 15 over the. I could find it. I mean, so in what was it, 21, 22 was full season, right? So that year he missed 9. The year before 20. And what was the 2021 season? That was
shortened.
Yeah, but how many was it? 54.
Yeah.
So he only missed 1 game that year.
And I think if I remember correctly, actually, that was to rest him up for the playoffs.
Yeah, and he had 13 the year before, 0 the year before that. So I mean, he's probably missed an average of 12-ish over the last 6 years. And I mean, really, that's kind of
Game 7 Vegas. That was a killer.
Yeah, it was a killer. But that's kind of the point I'm making, is that these guys are just, it's a reality. They're at the point in their careers where 70 games might be what you hope to get from them, 70, 72. And maybe it's that you just choose to rest them, or it's that they get banged up and at some point they miss 10 or 12. Now, I haven't really taken a deep dive into how that compares to other teams' defensemen. I mean, maybe everybody's defensemen are missing 10 games a year. The way teams block shots these days, I mean, it just seems like, everywhere around the league, it's kind of like goaltending. Very rarely do we go up against a team, and that's usually the only time I'll look at it, is when we get ready to play somebody and I look at their decor and I'll look and say, well, gee, they got 2 guys who haven't missed a game, but it very rarely do you look and you see, okay, well, they've got 5 guys who have played all but 1 or something. When they do, it's rare. So what Dallas had a couple of years ago, when they had that magical season and won the division, they didn't have anybody miss a game. 5 of their 6D missed 1 game or less. They had 9 forwards who played 80 or more. And when you get a year like that, that's when all of a sudden things are clicking your way, because you keep everybody in. But most teams talk about, you need 7 or 8 defensemen these days to get through a season. It's just the grind of playing that position.
Yeah. And and
the Wild should have that when you look at going ahead. I mean, that's what the strength of this team is. You look at the top 4, and then you add guys like Boyum coming along, or maybe it's Lambos that becomes a 7 or 8 guy here. Maybe it's Bogosian for another year. It's guys like that where you look and say, all right, well, if those are the extra guys we have, now you got something. Because if you need a guy to elevate his game for a couple of weeks, you've got some options.
I love this question from Puck Gold. It says, why don't coaches show the referees the replays on their tablet? McDavid clearly lifted his elbow into JoJo. So in other words, show him the thing. I mean, that would not go over well. Like, first of all, I don't know if you get some sort of misconduct for it, but 2, you don't want to be picking fights with the refs by showing them up on the tablet or pointing to the Jumbotron. One reason why I actually think the Wild this year have been, this is another one I'm trying to be judicious on how I answer this, how I say this. But one reason why I think the Wild are so disciplined this year is they're taking on the personality of the coach. He is so calm behind the net, where, and that's why last year, if you remember at the beginning of the year, Dean's like, I am going to be much calmer with the refs. I'm not going to get on them, because I think he
had longer hair, tried to look more laid back.
But I think that the referees started picking fights with the Wild and calling penalties and things like that. And the other thing is, I think that the players on the team took on the personality of the coach.
Right. And we've talked about that a lot. I think that's one of the things for which John Hines deserves a lot of credit, is he's instilled that in the team. And look, I loved Dean, and I loved his passion. I loved his excitement. I loved his energy. And
look what he's doing in Columbus.
Right. And I loved the way the team fed off it. They were fun to watch because they played with such a reckless abandon that made them exciting. The only problem with it was, and we saw them come unglued in that playoff series in Dallas, they just would lose their minds sometimes when calls didn't start to go their way and things would snowball. And I think with Hines, that's why this team has managed to stay as even, steady, no matter what the situation, down a couple. It doesn't seem to phase them, because he doesn't let it phase him. And so when he does snap, you usually know it's with good reason. And I think he's done a good job reining in a couple of those guys that straddle the line. When you think about guys like Hartman and Foligno, that, they're more valuable in the lineup than in the penalty box. And he's gotten through to them that way, that I don't want you to play with less emotion. I don't want you to play with less energy. I don't want you to be less of a leader. stand up for teammates any less, but do it in a way that doesn't hurt the team. And they've really done that. And so that was, let's go back one more time to your Edmonton fans. And there were a couple Wild fans who were like, how do the Wild not take a run at Connor McDavid? Well, take a run at him. What good's that going to do? I mean, they're going to find a way to send a message there. But at that point, it's a 3-3 game. And if you start trying to take runs at Connor McDavid and put the Oilers on the power play in a tie game, the Wild just, they pick their spots better than that. And
well, Hartman,
and it isn't like McDavid is going to stand up for himself in that case anyway. What's Foligno going to go hit him in the corner and drop the gloves
like,
with him?
like I want to know what fans expect, because I'm getting all this stuff like the Wild had no response. Like, what do you expect them to do? Like, you have the fans that like, well, what does it matter if Foligno fights Joshua Brown? You got to go after their stars. So then Hartman, who has a history of supplemental discipline, completely kicks out the legs of Draisaitl. So there, it's like, all right, if McDavid's going to do it to Johansson, we're going to go after Draisaitl, and that still didn't make the fans happy. So I want to know what the fans expect the response to be. Like, this is not 1984 anymore. And watching the Montreal Canadiens and the Quebec Nordiques, bloodbaths before games and stuff. Like, this is the new era. There's no such thing as an enforcer. You don't want those guys on your team anyway. They do absolutely nothing. Do you think having Matt Rempe in the lineup has kept Rangers players from ever getting cheap shotted? I mean, let's stop with the hyperbole here on this. Like, again, like what? And again, nobody saw it happen. But are you going after McDavid there? Come on.
I mean, it was a cheap shot by McDavid. There's no question about it. But it was the referees that missed the call.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Run out, take a run at a referee in the corner? I mean, they missed the call. McDavid's not a guy. It isn't like you had a donkey running around all game taking cheap shots at people, where then that's where you need somebody to step up and send a message. And I think the Wild have done that often enough this year when that's been necessary. And, even like last night, I thought one of the key points in last night's game was when Yakov Trenyan showed great discipline when he blasted Josh Brown in the corner
on a clean check.
Brown tries to get him to retaliate the whole way up the ice. Yeah, grabs him from behind, puts him in a headlock, in a bear hug, and the officials gave Trenyan about 4 chances to retaliate, and he never did. Walked away from it, gave Minnesota a power play. Now, if that guy had continued to do that all night long, Foligno or Trenyan would have said, all right, enough's enough. We don't need this guy taking runs at our star players. This was a one-off. It was a bad play by McDavid. Should have been a penalty, but it isn't like he was delivering cheap shots all night.
And the context, again, is that it's 3-3 game at that point. You're trying to win the game. And then suddenly, early in the third period, you're down 4-3. So now you're trying to come back in the game. You're not taking shots. Like I just don't sometimes understand what
and I just think that's why this year's Wild team has been different. Where now we saw Trenyan make a mistake earlier in the year where he got caught behind a play standing up for Eriksson Ek, and it cost the Wild a game.
Yeah.
So in this case, and he was talked to about it.
100%.
John Hines sat him down and
said it was a teaching moment.
Right. And now here's last night, the perfect example. Wild were up 1-0. He stays away from the retaliatory penalty. Wild get a power play, score again, go up 2 goals. And unfortunately, it didn't lead to a win last night. But I just think those are the kind of moments that are separating this team and has allowed this team to withstand what they have and stay relevant in the West.
Now, the Wild go to Nashville on Saturday night. If LaRue is in the lineup, look out, because that one the Wild are going to absolutely
100%. Yep. And now, if you're Nashville and LaRue's been playing every night, would you even put him in the lineup?
I would not.
I would not either. But I don't know their roster well enough to know, what their options might be. But I know that they weren't happy with him after that game because of the fact that what happened afterward, that seemed to light a fire under the Wild. It changed the entire complexion of that game, cost a team that is so desperate for points. If I'm if I'm Andrew Burnett, I don't even want that distraction. I want him out of the lineup for tomorrow night. It isn't like you're talking about a top 6 guy that's irreplaceable. I think the guy's a knucklehead anyway. I just would.
The contrast to that, of course, is that if you're Andrew Bennett, you might think, all right, is this going to be enough to distract the Wild into doing a bunch of stupid stuff? So it'll be interesting. But that is a storyline. I mean, Joe Smith and I had an insider on Monday where Marcus Foligno says it, that guys are lined up wanting to fight him. So he might not have to fight just once in that game. I mean, the Wild are.
Yeah, and if you're the Wild, if he's playing, you have to do that, without a doubt.
But it's going to have to be Foligno or Trenyon because, I don't think you want Lauko fighting in his first game back. No. And Jake Middleton's got a broken, he can't fight.
Right.
It's got to be Foligno.
Right. But so this then goes
unless
back
it's Johnny
to
Merrill or Bogosian or something.
Yeah,
like
maybe Bogosian. But you're short on the back end. Do you want to put a defenseman in the penalty box for 5 minutes? Marcus Foligno is way too valuable for this team to be fighting morons like Zach LaRue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a trade-off the Wild want. I mean, this guy's a non-factor in the game other than delivering cheap shots.
But Foligno is going to try to fight him.
No question. Yeah. And so
that's just like the other night. So Kolasar hits Juracek from behind. I'm sure Kolasar is like, look, he hit the brakes. I tried to let up all this stuff. I don't think I did anything wrong. Well, if you remember a month earlier, Barbashev, in the eyes of the Vegas Golden Knights, got injured by Foligno. Foligno thought it was interference by Barbashev and that he hurt himself. But regardless, he was willing to oblige Kolasar and fight him. So you knew the other night, Kolasar knows the code. I'm going to fight Foligno. You knew that was going to happen. The question is, does LaRue know the code that he's got to fight?
LaRue's the guy who was smirking on his way to the locker room after he got ejected from that game. And so I don't know if I'm the Wild, I might say, hey, look, if we're going to settle this, let's make it be early so it doesn't.
Yeah.
The last thing we need is this drifting into the game. If I'm the Predators, do I want to try and play this guy and distract from the Wild? I mean, maybe it's a learning moment for that kid that, hey, if this is the kind of thing you're going to do, this is the code in the NHL. And guys like Andrew Burnett, Darby Hendrickson, and the other guy, they know that code. And so they might just be like, hey, this is a lesson you got to learn, is that if you're going to deliver hits like this is how you have to respond. And so there might be a lesson there too, a teaching moment for them. It'll be interesting to see.
Let's take a quick break. Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Save smarter and grow your funds faster with a certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 4.25% 9-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return at maturity. Open a 4.25% APY 9-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 12/5/24, insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. Back here, worst seats in the house, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, Phil, and Stanley, who, by the way, are extremely dirty. What do you take them into a pig pen?
I didn't take them anywhere. All they did was go bark at the neighbor's dog, who comes out on his deck and barks every once in a while, and that gets these two guys all riled up. And I think what Phil does is he like digs his feet in the ground, like, let me at him, and sprays mud all over himself.
Yeah.
So they came in the house, and yes, they were covered from like paw to mid thigh with mud.
Yeah, Margot is going to freak out when she gets home.
Yeah, she's not going to be happy. I tried to flag them down, but then they got distracted because you showed up.
Yeah, and they need their lamb lung.
I was in the middle of trying to clean off their feet, and yeah, there might be some footprints on the new carpet.
Yeah, there is 100% footprints on the new carpet. What do you want to talk about now? Otherwise, we can go to Twitter questions. There are a ton of them that will probably get us talking.
we have Vinny's other thought.
Okay, yeah.
And he says, according to X, which never lies, the Winter Classic has had its worst ratings ever. What's the NHL's obsession with Chicago? Are ratings so high when they're good that they keep shoving them down our throats? Every NHL ad commercial seems to have Bedard in it, who's good, not great this year. What is it?
Yeah, can you imagine if Celebrini was in Chicago? Like they'd be promoting that guy to heck. I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know more the whole TV thing. I just thought it was so weird that they would have the Winter Classic on a day where there was a bunch of other games. Like, I thought that was bizarre. I do think and this isn't like, I am actually intrigued by what it's going to be like in Florida next year during the Winter Classic and all what that's going to, look like in terms of what the vision that Steve Mayer has, and also Tampa and how they make the ice work and all that stuff. I don't know if you read my story the other day, but obviously they're going to be able to climate control the one in Miami for the Winter Classic, but the outdoor game, which is a month later in Tampa, they're actually going to build essentially the way it was described to me, like an Amazon warehouse over the ice, and build this ice on Edward James Stadium's field, so it's out of the humidity and the sun and all the elements, rain, and then essentially remove all this stuff like concrete, steel, everything before the game. So that's gonna be fascinating. Oh, maybe Margot's home right now.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah,
it's either that or we've got like major criminal activity in Shoreview.
Yep, Amazon.
Yeah. But I think it's well, let me pause for 1 second.
Okay.
Just to but I have an opinion on this.
All right.
Hold on. So here's the only thing I would say is that, so we talked about this, I think, that week of the Winter Classic. And for me, the Winter Classic has lost some of its luster. Mm-hmm. And I don't make a point to watch the games every year. This year was weird with the way they scheduled it on New Year's Eve instead of New Year's Day. That was weird. There were a bunch of other NHL games that day. It can't be because they were trying to avoid the college football games, because there have always been college football games on New Year's Day. Yeah. That's not new. And so the only thing I would say about it is, and I was asked this a bunch that week, when the Winter Classic was here, I saw the impact it could have on that specific market. It ignited interest in hockey here for certain. There were people that were very casual NHL fans that were suddenly intrigued by going to Target Field to watch a game. So I do think they've got to find some ways to tweak it. Maybe it's to eliminate some of the other outdoor games during the course of the season, because there's so many of them now. I just don't think it has the same weight it used to. Maybe if there was only one a year, that would be something. In terms of Chicago, I know that last year they had one of the biggest increases in local TV ratings in the league when McDavid was a rookie. There was an interest in them again. And Bedard, sorry. And when the league,
certainly not this year.
No, but I don't know what their ratings are this year, but last year their ratings were among the five that increased the most. And they've always had really good local ratings. Yeah. And the NHL,
it's probably because nobody's showing up to United Center anymore.
It could be.
Have you watched some of their games?
Yeah, well, when we were there, it was crap. It's just.
I mean, that is one bad, awful hockey team.
It's a bad team. Well, maybe as bad as anybody in the league. San Jose is more exciting to watch than they are. And so the NHL, and we've talked about this before too, we lose the maximum number of games every year to national TV in Minnesota. And one of the reasons for that is we have some of the highest local ratings in the league. the NHL is a regional sport for television viewing. It just is. It's not the same as some of the other sports that are more nationally driven.
Yep.
So when Chicago plays, they start out by saying, we're going to get a huge audience in Chicago. When we grab a Minnesota-Edmonton game on TNT last night, we know we're going to start with a huge viewership in Minnesota. And then whatever we can pick up elsewhere is a bonus. And so for that reason, Chicago's always going to be an attractive team. And when teams are hosting it, for example, when Minnesota had the Stadium Series, Minnesota, they want to play teams like Chicago for that because they know there's going to be an interest. And the national networks want it because they know they're going to get those viewers from Chicago to watch the game. The second piece of that is to have star power and competitive teams. But it was weird when you looked at it this year. The outdoor games they had, St. Louis, Chicago, and then Columbus and Detroit. 3 out of those 4 teams have replaced their coaches already this year.
Yeah.
I mean, none of them were really expected to be a major factor this year. I think Dean's done a terrific job and had Columbus inside the playoff picture. But, I mean, it's not like they've got star power that everybody can't wait to see.
Right.
So it was a weird choice, a weird year for teams that you're not seeing teams that have a natural hook because of how good they are. So I don't know where it goes from here. I do think they've got to find some way, play the game outside on a lake or a river or something.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, because to play on refrigerated ice sheets in Florida, that just doesn't, I don't care about it. It doesn't
Lake
do
of the
anything
Woods,
for me.
Jets versus Wild.
Right. Now, if you do that, put a game out on a lake somewhere.
Yeah.
Now you'd have some interest.
Yeah.
Because the other part to me is you've got a generation of hockey players now. When was the last time you think any of these guys were like grabbing their skates and stick and walking down the street to skate at a park when they were kids?
Yeah.
These guys have been playing in programs for their entire life where it's been all about indoor ice. The days of guys that grew up playing outside when they were squirts and peewees are long
Although
since
the Wild,
gone.
I heard, had a big Christmas. A bunch of players had a big Christmas outdoor thing on a lake.
Right. But I'm saying like these players when they were kids, they didn't grow up playing squirt and peewee hockey outside.
Right.
So that now it's their return to their roots of playing outdoor hockey.
That's the most cliched part of writing those stories that used to drive me crazy. I do think that it's good that hopefully next year you're going to have Tampa, Florida, that are really good teams. Obviously, Rangers and Boston are big time draws. But to your point, Anthony, like hockey is such a provincial tribal sport that, even we see it in the playoffs all the time with ratings or with my reads at The Athletic when I'm covering other things. Like you're a Minnesota Wild fan, you probably only care about the Wild. It's not like the NBA and the NFL where you're just watching other teams and you're entertained by watching the Flyers play the Hurricanes.
Well, the NFL is everything's national. Yeah. And maybe fantasy football has a big part of that. I'm not sure. It's such a great made for TV sport, but you're right. It's when the Wild play, even when it's the playoffs and the Wild are playing Dallas, I don't think that a huge chunk of the Wild fans are also making sure they catch the Kings and the Oilers at 9:30 that night.
Yeah.
Once the Wild are done playing, I guess it's later than that because the Wild always play at 8:52 in the playoffs. But the point just being that they're not necessarily can't miss games in all the other series in the Stanley Cup playoffs. There are some fans who for sure are, and they're watching guys like you and me. Whatever we're doing the next night, we're flipping the game on, even if it's just in the background. Somebody
actually asked on Twitter, what does Anthony do on an off night where you're not working, like last night?
Well, last night I was at the game.
Yeah.
But
where did you sit? I was looking for you, though.
I sat in the booth next to my normal booth.
All right.
I think it's most nights I have hockey on TV. And I love watching the other local shows. I always try to watch the broadcast of the next team we're going to play whenever possible, because I want to see their local broadcast. I want to see what they're talking about in their open of the show. I want to see what they're talking about with their players, what their coach has to say in their pregame press conference, all that kind of stuff. You just never know when you might pick something up. But I also love watching the local shows, even if it's not our next opponent, just because that's an apples to apples comparison to what we do on a nightly basis, not the national shows where they're doing one game a week and they have more cameras and replays at their disposal. it's a bigger show, a bigger budget show, but I like watching what the other local shows are doing, how it sounds, how it looks, the graphics that they use, the terminology, the phrases that their play-by-play guy might use, the conversation between the play-by-play guy and the analyst. I like watching all of that. So I watch a ton of hockey during the regular season, and it's mostly local shows, just because I prefer those to the national broadcast. There's more insight, there's more knowledge. They're around their team more often, so they go a lot deeper into the stories of what's happening with those teams. And even like, it doesn't matter. So what day is it today? Well, the Wild played on Wednesday night. On Tuesday night, we had dinner at home, but I probably switched around from 6 different local broadcasts that night, just flipping from game to game. And Monday night we were watching the Vikings game, but as soon as that was over, we had hockey games on TV. So that's what I do almost every night.
Right. All right, let's go to some Twitter questions. Here's an open-ended one. What do you think of David Juracek? This person says he had a few nice plays where he made an impact and kept offensive pressure going by pinching and making a few good passes, which I saw. But then he says, this is Randy, which I totally agree with too. But there were also times it looked like he was falling over his own feet behind our own net. He did have to pick himself off the ice a ton last night. I think he's going to grow into his body still. He's still a young man. Like he's big, but if you actually see him off the ice, he's got room to get bigger.
He does.
He's going to get the Marco Rossi treatment this summer where Billy Guerin is going to tell him, you are staying in Minnesota. And I know you want to go back to Czechia, but you're staying in Minnesota. And I think he's going to have to do it.
If he wants to be an NHL player. And that's when we'll find out just how committed he is.
Work with Andy Ness, work with Matt Harder.
Yeah. And they've got Andy Ness is one of the best in the league in terms of power skating stuff. And we've seen it, the impact he's had on so many players throughout the Wild's recent 7, 8, 10 years. I think if he wants, we'll find out how serious he is about wanting to be a player. Based on that.
Yep. Who's upstairs, by the way? Is that Ariana?
Yeah.
I thought it was Phil.
No, Ariana she's dragging a little bit because she was at the game last night.
Oh,
so
yeah,
a little slow to arise today. But I thought, to me, Juracek, and I've thought this for a few of these games, he's looked like a guy who needs time in Iowa.
Yeah.
And made a couple plays. I talked to John Hines about him the other day, and he said there were a few plays in there where I kind of raise your eyebrows and say, okay, well, I could see the reason why people were excited about him. There was that play, but his decision-making for when to pinch is like a 50-50 shot. And in his own zone, he really struggled last night against the skating ability of the Oilers, I thought, and got exposed a couple times there. This is, I'm not an expert on this for sure, but I think he looks like a guy who could use the rest of this season in Iowa and he would have. He's only up here because there's 3 guys out of the lineup.
You know who I feel bad for right now is Jake Middleton. Like, he needs Faber and Brodin and Spurgeon back more than anybody. Like, he is bleeding chances, his analytics.
Yeah. We've always said that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, he comes back from a broken finger.
Comes back early because the team needs him. All that's true. And he brings so much beyond the analytics, just in leadership and all. And believe me, the guys in that room know that he's back sooner than he probably otherwise would have been because of the guys that are out of the lineup. But I just think you're looking at a guy that, as we've talked about, he's a tremendous addition to this team.
Yeah.
The reality is he's the 4th defenseman on this team. And in a perfect world, maybe he's your number 5 guy. When he plays with Spurgeon or Faber, he can be a serviceable top 4 guy for sure. Better than serviceable.
I thought he was probably their best defenseman
for a long time.
Yeah.
But that's when he's playing with one of those guys.
Yeah.
And when he has to be the guy that drives his defensive pair, it's a little bit different. And it's not a knock on him. He's a terrific player. He's been a huge part of this team's success. But right now, he, like a lot of other guys, is being forced to play in an elevated role and do more than he's done when he's in a perfect world.
Yeah. Jesse asks, someday when you retire, where will you live? Will you stay in Minnesota? I know your answer to that, Anthony. That's obvious. Me, that's a good question. Up in the air. I can tell you one thing. All right, Phil, you're all dirty.
They're back from their duty,
Phil
making sure the neighborhood was safe.
Yeah. Did Ariana clean him? He looks cleaner.
No, he was just outside.
So where did all the mud go?
Well, he probably was running around in the snow.
Jesus. Actually, no, it's all over my pants. Anyway, me, that's up in the air. I can't leave this podcast, Anthony. How can I, when I retire, I got to do this semi-retired.
Exactly.
I wouldn't mind going to Vegas, though. I was just out there for 3 days. I just love it out there.
I love it as a visitor.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to live there.
Yeah, no, I know.
And in fact, I ran into Jamie Hirsch out there, who our old colleague.
Yeah, she came looking for you. I sent her up to the press box.
Yeah, and I ran into her husband Matt out on the street walking into the arena too. So that was interesting. But she just moved to Vegas. She's doing some fill-in stuff on some of their games as well as PWHL stuff, and she's just a terrific person. And we were just talking about moving out to the Vegas area. They've got family in both Arizona and in LA, and they don't live downtown or on the strip in Vegas. And she just said the only time we come down here is when we're coming down to work. And to me, that is what it would be for me.
Yeah.
Like I love going to visit the strip for 3 days, and then that's enough.
Yeah.
But I love going out there.
I was thinking this at the airport yesterday. It's so funny, the difference between when you arrive and everybody all excited and when you leave and everybody just either looking miserable or tired or
right. Even if you've had a good week, you still are just like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah, time to cleanse.
Right. And I love the energy. Yeah. I love the vibe. Yeah. I love the bright lights and the excitement and everything. I really do. I truly love it, and I love being out there. But it's for that. For me, I don't see myself leaving Minnesota. I could see myself getting an option or a place of some kind in a warmer weather climate. But as I've always said, I love Minnesota in the summertime.
Yeah.
I love the golf season. I love the fact that we have multiple seasons here. Now the other thing I have to say is I got a lot of years left before I retire. So
I might have 6 months.
Yeah.
So I do start contract negotiations tomorrow on my new deal, but we'll see. Maybe this is it.
Well, you can be
a full-time job. Will be podcasting.
Full-time podcast, and boy, think of the quality of the show we'll have.
I know. Can you imagine if I retire and I just have to do this podcast and I have to, now I'm so in the know, then I'm going to have to just pretend I'm in the know.
Well, you'll have to just find ways to bottle up all the things that make you angry until next week's show.
Easier. I was actually thinking this though the other day, like I can't because I was thinking like, what am I going to do when I have nothing to do? And it dawned on me that my job is, this is going to sound way darker than I mean it, or maybe not, that my job is just wasting time before I die. Well, like what would I do if I had nothing to do? There's nothing that I like other than my job. It's like, what am I going to do? Gamble?
Well,
play poker, craps. But you need a job to do that.
You'll find things to complain about.
No, I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm just saying so I kind of need to re-up my contract. All right. Here's a question that everybody keeps on asking, and it's hard to, even like Jake Middleton said it last night. Well, like we're missing 5 guys from the lineup, but why are the Wild so mediocre at home? Because this has been all year long, Anthony. Like they're 11-10-1 at home. I don't remember one game where they just were like, man, they were awesome. There have been some exciting games and some incredible finishes, overtime wins, things like that. But they just have not been nearly as precision-like at home as they have been on the road.
Yeah, that's true. And we've talked about it a lot, trying to figure out what it is and why. And I think there's some distractions at home for sure. You got a lot of guys with young kids and families that are busy, and these are all such great guys that I think life at home is different than life on the road. And they're not the only team dealing with it, but I don't think they've probably handled that. I think it's something they're going to continue to look at for sure. I also think
this is going to be stupid. I said it tongue in cheek the other day, but the only thing that's changed is moving everything over to Trio. Like there is something to be said for being at the rink in the morning in your home arena, skating on that ice sheet. I know everything ice sheets all the same size, but that's the only thing that's changed. And this team is usually dominant at home.
They have been. And so the only thing I was going to add is that if you look at their home schedule lately, a lot of it has been catching the wrong teams at the wrong times.
No doubt.
So when you go back to just before the holidays, they caught Edmonton at home, and that was without Eriksson and Brodin, and then Middleton gets hurt in the opening minute. They were coming back kind of tired from a Utah trip. Then they beat Philadelphia the next game, but then the rest of that homestand with a tremendously beat up roster was Vegas and Florida, and they wrapped that up against Utah in a game where they played great but got beat by goaltending. But there's going to be a lot of teams that lose home games to Edmonton, Vegas, and Florida. And then they had the win against Chicago right before the holidays. Out of the holidays, their home games, they beat Nashville New Year's Eve. They played, it was Ottawa right before that, where they played great but got beat by a hot goaltender, if you remember right. And now these last couple, Colorado and Edmonton, with a roster that's this shorthand. I mean, I've just named probably 6 losses that are against teams that are in the top 6 in the NHL, and all at times where you're beat up. So take those 6 games away, and what's the home record? Now you're 11-4-3 or whatever, and we're probably not even having the conversation. So that part will probably all even out, because you're going to get home games against teams like Seattle and San Jose and Anaheim, and where that might balance out. I think right now you're just talking about a stretch where at home they've happened to catch some of the elite in the NHL. But they've done well against those teams when they've traveled there with this same kind of shorthanded lineup. And that's why I'm just guessing that you just get a team out on the road where it's a tight group. So when they're on the road, it's a lot of time together, and it really has pulled them together. And now they've got a belief like, hey, we've been in buildings like this and won. And that probably all starts from that first 7-game road trip of the year where they went 5-1-1, and all of a sudden just kind of had that swagger. Like, we believe we're going to find a way.
Yeah. A couple more, then we'll wrap up the show. Why didn't Husnudinov get the Rossi treatment AHL to develop like Ogren? Does he have a NHL or KHL clause? He does have a European clause. I don't disagree, though. Like, I think he should be in the minors just for a little bit. Just get some scoring. Like, right now, he has no ability, zero, to finish or make a play. And like, he does so many things well in terms of skating and his smarts and things like that. It'd be nice to send him there for a couple weeks, let him score 5 goals and then come back up. Because the fact that he is centering a fourth line that never, ever, 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 ever scores is a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. But here's the only thing I would say is that I think, number one, his game has been okay. His game has been fine. I agree with you can't score. If it's me, what I would love to see once everybody's healthy is put him in the press box for a couple games.
Yeah.
Because right now, I don't get the sense that he's playing an entitled game, but it might be a good eye-opener just to see. Play Shore in place of him for a night. Play Jones in place of him for a night once your guys are back and Lauko's on that line. And just, look, I mean, those guys aren't doing anything less than what he is. So, maybe Husnudinov is a better player than one of those two guys, but the margin isn't wide enough where, I mean, you look around the league. Tortorella's putting Michkov in the press box for crying out loud. Now, I think that's another extreme, and it's a guy that, he's taken that to new levels, but you just can't be afraid to sit a guy down for a couple games just to say, look, we think there's more there. Go watch from upstairs, see what you see. And you're a part of the future here. You're a part of this team moving forward. But what's the difference right now? Let's say you got Lauko and when Kaprizov's back and Johansson's back and you kind of trickle everybody down in the lineup, remember what the fourth line was. It was somebody like Trennian or Hartman or somebody like that is going to be down there.
Yep.
And so you've got a spot where you could say, all right, well, what's the difference between Gaudreau and Lauko and Shore compared to Gaudreau, Lauko, and Husnudinov?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a little, but not enough to make it where it's an impossible decision to make.
All right, last question of the show. Somebody asked about Brock Besser being a offseason target. I think that Brock Nelson is priority number one. If the Wild could afford both of them, I think he would do it in a minute. The question is, Is there enough room, and can you afford both of them? Obviously, Kaprizov's priority number 1, Rossi's priority number 2. You got Urov here coming as well. Somebody, by the way, asked if Urov's ELC would be a standard 3 years or 2 years like Kaprizov. Depends. If they signed him after this season, like this season burned a year, it'd be a 3-year deal. So essentially a couple games, and then it's burned. Or if it starts next year, it'd be a 2-year deal. But yeah, I do think that the Wild have interest in both Brock Nelson and Brock Besser, but I think Nelson would probably be priority 1. And if they could make both work, he'd love to, I'm sure. But again, the money's not fine, is not infinite. And Rossi's made himself a lot of money. Remember, they have a goaltending decision to make, probably not this summer. I think you're going to want to let it to play out. But if Gustafsson has another great year, you're going to probably want to re-sign him. So like, I have trouble believing that they could get both done, but we'll see. A lot of it depends on Kaprizov and how much money he gets.
Yeah, and that's going to be something to watch this summer for sure. And there's, with the guesses that the cap is going to rise the way it's going to rise, it's going to create some volatility in the market that we haven't seen before. And some of these guys who just signed long-term deals are going to see lesser players race past them in terms of AAVs on their contracts, just because there's more money out there to be had.
Without doubt.
And so that it'll be interesting to watch. But I think I love Brock Nelson's game. I mean, we can't get in trouble for speculating and talking about free agency like the team can, but I think he'd be a perfect fit here with the Wild.
Yeah. He's getting up there in age though, and he is in the middle
but
of
if it's a couple of year deal where and now you add that, I think a veteran presence wouldn't be the worst thing to add on this club. If you start to say, let's assume Urov is here, let's assume Boyum is here for the next couple of seasons, where you've got a team that, has a pretty good young core. I don't worry as much about adding a veteran for a couple of years at that point.
January 22nd is our next live show at Elsie's. That's at 7 p.m. February 5th at Split Rocks at 7 p.m. Thanks to our newest sponsor, Giggly THC Beverages. Thanks for joining us in the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services is your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, but you can also do heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, everything there. Royal Credit Union, Twill in the Edina Galleria on X Fish. You can look at them in the App Store, and Clamshell Beach Resort, and as I mentioned, Giggly THC Beverages. Talk to you on the 22nd at Elsie's, Anthony. You have that in your calendar?
I'm putting it in right now. January 22nd?
Yeah. What did I say?
No, I'm asking.
Yeah, January 22nd.
All right, I'll be there.
All right, see ya.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive